many of you like saying you're sorry? Hopefully you do it better than that. None of us like to admit that we're wrong, right? I mean, admitting that we're wrong is oftentimes, humiliating. We feel somehow lesser than maybe the other person we're talking to. We don't like that, so we don't like to say we're sorry. We don't like to admit we're wrong a lot of times. But if we're on the wrong path, it's really important for us to do. Let's take a moment to pray. Father God, we want to come before you today and not only praise, Lord, for who you are and how you work in our lives, but in a spirit of humility as well, Lord. The spirit of coming before you and maybe having to say that we're sorry. Asking your forgiveness, Lord, for some of our attitudes, some of the ways that we have treated you, some of the misconceptions that we've had about you, God. So, Lord, as we open your word today, we ask that you reveal truth, maybe in ways that we've never seen it before. We ask, Lord, that you correct us, that you show us, Lord, who you are. Help us to understand you better than we ever have had before. Lord God, help us to really embrace who you are and not some kind of plastic version that we've created or allowed the world to create for ourselves. Father, we want to know you. We want to worship you in spirit and in truth. So, Lord, I just pray that as we open your word, that you would get me out of the way, get anything that somehow comes between you and us and the message out of the way. May your spirit speak. In Christ's name. There's a lot of error in the world. A lot of times that people have great intentions. They believe that they're on the right track, and they're wrong. Back in those of you, let's start this off this way. Those of you who are older than, let's say, 45, raise your hands. Okay. Those of us who are a little bit older than the rest of you, the majority of you, if you were to raise our sleeves up, you would probably notice that there was a small scar there that you guys don't have. This is a scar from a smallpox vaccination. Back in 1796, Edward Jenner made a pretty amazing discovery. He discovered that people who had been basically exposed to cowpox, they didn't get smallpox. Smallpox was this major killer. In fact, if you look between the years 1877 and 1977, they estimate that 500 million people in the world died of smallpox. Smallpox, how it starts, if you ever see a really bad victim of it, you get these little blisters all over your body. A third of the people who get smallpox go blind as well, not to mention all the scarring. And 30% of the people who get it die. A horrible death. Said that in the last years of smallpox, when it was really virulent, around 15 million people a year would die from Some estimates say that at the time, 10% of England's population was dying from smallpox. But why don't you have smallpox vaccinations then? Because in 1977, the very last natural case of smallpox occurred. It still exists in laboratories, but it's no longer in the wild. And in 1972, because they were no longer having cases in the United States, they stopped routinely vaccinating children. But it came about because one man was seeking the truth, and he found it in the fact that there was such a thing as a vaccine, that you could develop this, and this vaccine could be used. However, even though that was later, it was proved to be true, time and time again, there were still people who doubted it, who got up. There were cartoons lambasting Jenner and saying that what he was doing was morally and ethically wrong, and that people who would get this vaccine because it was from cowpox and it used with animals in the vaccine, that you would somehow develop cow deformities. People would start, getting hooves and things like that. They had all of this kind of crazy stuff. Even as far into much, much later, there was a doctor by the name of Charles Crichton. And Charles Crichton wrote a book saying that the smallpox vaccine actually caused syphilis. I'm not sure how he came up with that. The thing is that Crichton and others like him may have been very well-meaning, but they were wrong. One of the things that we see is sometimes we can believe so strongly in something, but we can still be wrong. Are you willing? Are you willing to admit it when you are wrong? Are you willing to accept correction? Proverbs 12:1 says this: whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but whoever hates correction is stupid. Now, that's pretty blunt, don't you think? Whoever hates correction is stupid, but whoever loves discipline loves knowledge. You may say, wait a minute, I don't particularly like discipline. Why is that? It's because oftentimes we associate discipline with punishment. We say, oh, I'm about to be disciplined now, and we think about, the big paddle or something like that, That's kind of our concept. But that's not what real discipline is. True discipline is a guidance through attitude, through actions, through basically instruction that leads to knowledge. And that knowledge leads us forward. So we should embrace discipline. We should embrace correction. And we should keep the mind open and realize that when, we read the Bible or something, or maybe people have told us things, that maybe we need to go back to the Word of God. We need to go back and receive the correction that's there. We may need to realize that maybe some of the ways that we've been living, that our friends say that are okay, and that others says are maybe not corresponding to the truth. And we need to get our lives back on the right path. You see, if we persist in the wrong way, we will never get on the right path. In Malaysia, what side of the road do you guys drive on? Left side? Yeah, different than here, right? Now, if I decide to go to Malaysia and I know the right way to drive, and I decide to get in my car and drive the way I drive in the United States and Malaysia, what's going to happen? Bye-bye. Yeah, bye-bye. Exactly. Why? Because that's the wrong way. And I need to learn that. Coaches in sports, some of you have played sports before. Your coaches tell you things like, keep your eye on the ball. If you persist in closing your eyes, what happens? You have problems. If, in math, you get these formulas, and I'm a horrible math person, but the formulas are there to teach you a certain way. If you decide, I'm going to ignore the formula, I'm just going to do it my way, what happens? You get the wrong answer. And you can apply that in lots of different ways in life. If we decide that we are just going to do everything our way, and that we are going to take our preconceived notions and decide this is the way we go, and never be open to what God may be teaching us, then we're going the wrong way. In the book of Job, we see a man who was called blameless, righteous. A man who was following God as best he knew how. But then tragedy came. Then he seems to have lost everything. And we've looked here, there's this confusion. And his friends come along and they start telling untruths. Not deliberate lies, but they're telling untruths. They're saying, okay, Job, you sinned, therefore you're punished because that's the way it is. And Job has come into a worldview that says this is the way it is. But it wasn't the way it was. Yes, sometimes you sin, you're punished for it, but there's a much bigger picture that Job and his contemporaries aren't seeing. And because they're not seeing it, and because they are confused, and because they are convinced about these untruths, they decide that, they're right. And there could not be anything different. Job, in his defense, we saw, gets to the point that he's justifying himself. He gets to the point that he's saying basically, there is no way I could be wrong. In essence, their view of God is flawed because it's incomplete. The two parties basically reach a deadlock in Job 32:1. It says this, so these three men, these are his friends, stop answering Job because what? Job is righteous in his own eyes. Righteous in his own eyes. Notice the wording there. It's not that Job is righteous. Job is righteous in his own eyes. You ever been there? Self-righteous. There used to be on the old maps back, many years ago before we circumnavigated the globe. In the old maps, you would see the sailors that would, and the cartographers would come up with these, sort of approximations of the continents and the islands, etc. But at the edges of the map, oftentimes, they would draw pictures of dragons. In fact, there would even be legends sometimes say, if you go this way, you're going to fall off the edge of the world. Or, this way be dragons. Well, as crazy as that may sound, in some ways our attitudes can be very much this way be dragons. If you decide that you somehow are righteous, and you base your world around the fact of your own righteousness, that way be dragons. Self-righteousness is dangerous. And Job, being to the point righteous in his own eyes has crossed the line. He has gotten dangerous. The deadlock between these two parties is broken, though, by an unexpected and surprising source. Job 32, 2 through 10 says this. But Elihu, son of Barachel the Buzite, of the family of Ram, became very angry with Job for justifying himself rather than God. He was also angry with the three friends because they had found a way to refute Job and yet had condemned him. Now, Elihu had waited before speaking to Job because they were older than him. But when he saw that the three men had nothing more to say, his anger was aroused. So Elihu, son of Barachel the Buzite, said, I'm young in years, and you are old. That is why I was fearful, not daring to tell you what I know. I thought age should speak. Advanced years should teach wisdom. But it is the spirit in a person, the breath of the Almighty, that gives them understanding. It's not only the old who are wise, not only the aged who understand what is right. Therefore I say, listen to me. I too will tell you what I know. You know, there's something that we can learn here. God speaks in many ways. God speaks in many ways. There's a common complaint that we have. A common complaint out there that God doesn't talk to me. God may talk to other people, but he doesn't talk to me. I've never heard the voice of God. But God doesn't always speak to everyone in the same way. How did God speak to Moses? First time. Burning bush. Wow. I've never seen a burning bush. Have you guys? I mean, I've seen a bush that's burned. Or maybe it'll burn down. I've never heard a voice from it. That was pretty unique. But God spoke to Moses through a burning bush. There were disciples after Jesus' crucifixion going onto the road to Emmaus. And a man came up beside them and started talking to them. They didn't recognize who he was. And as they began walking, he began to explain salvation from the Scripture, and he began to basically explain who Jesus was from the Scripture. Later on, they said, after they recognized it was Jesus, they said, didn't our hearts burn within us? They had no idea who this person was. But God was still speaking to them. In restricted access countries, you have Muslims. Oftentimes, no way to get the gospel to them. But time and time again, you read stories of how a Muslim man or woman will suddenly have a vision. They will see Christ there. And they will begin to try to explore and find out. And they come to Christ because God has spoken through them through a vision. God speaks to us through this. Sometimes we will open the Word of God and we'll come to a verse, and it's like God is talking directly to us. Sometimes through circumstances, through open doors that we walk through, or closed doors that we don't walk through, God speaks to us. So when we say God doesn't speak to us, he may not speak to us necessarily in the way we'd like. But he still speaks. I love the way he spoke to Elijah in 1 Kings 19 and 11 through 13. He said, the Lord said, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. I assume this was in his heart. I'm not really sure. But then it says, then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Point is in all of this is that we may not necessarily like the fact that we don't hear God's voice in a big audible voice. But that doesn't mean He's not speaking to us. We just have to have the ears to listen. In this case, with Elihu, God is using a young man to speak. You know, these guys are older, right? They're wiser. They're the elders. And this young guy who's been hesitant, he comes up and speaks. You know, sometimes when we get older, as much as we like young people, we forget that God can speak through them too. I have been taught by my children. I have had my children speak to me and instruct me in ways that I know that while it is their voice, it is God speaking through them. And that's very humbling to me, because I'm their dad, right? I'm supposed to know everything. Sometimes God speaks to us in a wide variety of ways, even with people who are younger than us. Young people, though, need to be sure that when they're speaking the truth. Don't just say, "Hey, well, God uses a young person, I'm going to go instruct the old." No, make sure you're speaking the truth. And older people, we have the same responsibility. So when we're speaking to younger people, or people our own age or older, we need to speak the truth. We need to follow after what God is telling us. It applies to all of us. In Elihu's case, God's Spirit, the breath of the Almighty, it says, gives him understanding. And that same Spirit also compels him later on to rebuke Job. First, for thinking God is his enemy. Look at Job 33, 8 through 12. It says, "But you have said in my hearing," I heard the very words, "I am pure, I have done no wrong, I am clean and free from sin. Yet God has found fault with me. He considers me his enemy. He fastens my feet in shackles. He keeps close watch on all my paths. But I tell you, in this you are not right. For God is greater than any mortal." What's Job's issue? He's viewing God as reacting as a man would. And he should know better, because he's walked with God. Sometimes I think we think God is just like some wise man up there. And he's subject to the same kind of things we are. But God is God. And our understanding of him has been revealed somewhat through Christ and through the Bible, etc. But we do not have a complete handle on who God is, because he is so much bigger and wiser and beyond us. And so when we start to take human things, and usually it's more in the human weaknesses, and apply them to God, we're out of our minds. God is not subject to pettiness. God is not subject to, oh, well, you know, you like her better than you like me. He's not subject to that kind of stuff. God is God. He's beyond human weaknesses and human fallibilities, especially human sin. And Job should know better. His ways are higher than ours, his thoughts than our thoughts. And we cannot attribute human motives to the divine. And we also cannot limit him and demand he speak to us in the way that we prefer. And Elihu rebukes Job about this also in Job 33:13-20. He says, why do you complain to him that he responds to no one's words? For God does speak, now one way, now another, though no one perceives it. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls on people as they slumber in their beds, he may speak in their ears and terrify them with warnings, to turn them from wrongdoing and keep them from pride, to preserve them from the pit, their lives from perishing by the sword. Or someone may be chastened on a bed of pain, with constant distress in their bones, so that their body finds food repulsive and their soul loathes the choicest meal. In other words, God speaks in a wide variety of ways. And Elihu, this young man, is saying, Job, wake up. You're accusing God of not speaking to you. How do you know he's not? Maybe you're just not listening. Obviously, we prefer that God speak to us in the ways we like. But maybe he speaks to us in other ways sometimes to get our attention. When I was a kid, I've told this story before, and I'm not going to go into details, but when I was a kid, even though I'd known about God and I heard about God, and even as a 3-year-old and 4-year-old, I was doing weird things like explaining the Trinity to somebody. My mom was stunned. What's going on, But it wasn't until I was 5 years old that I had a direct encounter with God, but it wasn't just, some hearing or something. I had a vision. A series of nightmares, basically, of where I saw Jesus and I accepted him rather than the alternative. I've had circumstances in my life I can't explain other than the fact that it's God's hand. Things have happened to me that have convinced me without, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that it was God working. So why do I believe God exists? Why do I believe he cares for me and he directs my path? Quite frankly, in my life, how can I not? Because I have overwhelming personal experience that tells me that God's out there. He's sovereign. He's moving in my life. And the thing is that I don't believe I'm unique. I believe that every one of us in this room, if you stopped and took the time to examine your life and go back and think about it, you can see God's hand. You can see how God has directed you and is moving in your life. How he loves you. He's provided for you. I think if you really took the exercise and the time to think about that, you would see God's hand. First time I heard about a guy by the name of Larry Ward was when I read a biography about him called This Poor Man Cried. Larry Ward was the founder of Food for the Hungry. And as he was confronted with the needs of thousands and thousands of people out there who were dying, children who were dying, and needing food and just feeling absolutely helpless, one day, as it was weighing heavily on his soul, he prayed this. He says, "But Father, what can I do? I'm only one person." And God answered him, and it wasn't audible, but it came to him just like God was saying these words. "But they die one at a time, my son. They die one at a time." And so Larry, with a humble heart and a bowed head, prayed, "Thank you, Lord. If they die one at a time, then we can help them one at a time. But God was speaking. Not in words, not in some flashy burning bush or whatever. God was speaking, and the results? Thousands and millions of people. Whose lives changed one at a time. God speaks in many ways. But Elihu also points out something else. He points out that God is beyond our ability to judge. God is beyond our ability to judge. We are great at judging. But you know what? We can't judge God. He is beyond that. Who are we to judge God anyway? How can the thing created ever judge the Creator? Romans 9:20 says this. It says, "But who are you, a human being, to talk back to God? Shall what is formed say to the one who formed it, 'Oh, why did you make me like this?'" How can we? Because we don't have the mind of the Creator. We don't really understand the purpose. We know that we're to glorify God. That's been revealed to us. But we don't know necessarily how, with all our warts, with all our problems, with everything else that He's designed. We don't necessarily see the big picture, and we don't know how He's going to use us in all ways. We just need to trust that He is. So we can't say to God, "Well, why did you make me shorter than the average person?" Or why did you make me go bald when everybody else is or why did you make me this way or that way? Why do I sing like a toad? Why do I, whatever it is? Do you ever realize that maybe, just maybe, God designed you exactly the way you're supposed to be. For a purpose that you don't see right now. But that He does. So who are we to judge our Creator? In his despair and confusion, Job has mounted a defense that is based on self-justification. And Elihu calls him out on it. Job 34, 5 through 9. Job says, "I am innocent, but God denies me justice. Although I am right, I am considered a liar. Although I am guiltless, His arrow inflicts an incredible wound. Is there anyone like Job who drinks scorn like water? He keeps company with evildoers. He associates with the wicked. For he says that there is no profit in trying to please God." Basically, what Elihu is saying here is, Job, you're dangerously close here to doing what? To accusing God of wrongdoing. You're justifying yourself to the point, you haven't come out and absolutely cursed God, but your self-righteousness is speaking volumes. By believing God is punishing him as an innocent man, Job is essentially, if not overtly, saying God is in the wrong. And Elihu blasted Job 34, 12 through 17. It is unthinkable that God would do wrong, that the Almighty would pervert justice. Who appointed him over the earth? Who put him in charge of the whole earth, the whole world? If it were his intention and he withdrew his spirit and breath, all humanity would perish together and mankind would return to the dust. If you have understanding, hear this. Listen to what I say. Can someone who hates justice govern? Will you condemn the just and mighty one? Job, what are you thinking? What may not understand. We get it, you're confused, Job. But don't accuse God. God is not some petty and self-serving judge that was appointed by man. He's not subject to sinfulness. He's God. And if we truly grasp that fact, then such a belief is asinine. This is what we need to understand. God's ways are beyond our understanding. God's ways are beyond our understanding. You know, sometimes when I'm working at my desk, I've got my laptop open and maybe the light is, not as bright behind me or whatever, and I'm working. And there's a fly in the room. A fly will sometimes come and land on my laptop screen. Does this ever happen to you? You ever have a fly or some kind of insect land on your computer screen? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. It is very irritating. I don't recommend you swat it, by the way. It just leaves a smear all over you. But they do, and they crawl around, etc., on your laptop screen. You know what I find fascinating? Is, first of all, they're not reading what I wrote. Fly is not reading what I wrote. Because here's the thing. The fly has absolutely no understanding of the laptop. The fly sees the light, the fly sees a flat surface. But beyond that, does a fly understand the computer? Can a fly comprehend all of this that's going on? In its brief life, by the way, flies you think they're forever, but the fly only lives about 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Can that fly understand what it's doing? What the laptop is about? Absolutely not. No way. You and I, trying to understand God, it's like flies trying to understand something so beyond us. Has Job suffered? Yes. But has God done wrong or owe him an explanation? No, because his reasons are beyond us. Job 37, 14 through 24. Listen to this, Job. Stop and consider God's wonders. Do you know how God controls the clouds and make his lightning flash? Do you know how the clouds hang poised, those wonders of him who has perfect knowledge? You who swelter in your clothes when the land lies hushed under the south wind, can you join him in spreading out the skies, hard as a mirror of cast bronze? Tell us what we should say to him. We cannot draw up our case because of our darkness. Should he be told that I want to speak? Would anyone ask to be swallowed up? Now, no one can look at the sun, bright as it is in the skies, after the wind has swept them clean. Out of the north he comes in golden splendor. God comes in awesome majesty. The Almighty is beyond our reach, exalted in power. In his justice and great righteousness, he does not oppress. Therefore, people revere him, for does he not have regard for all the wise in the earth? Basically, Elihu ends by saying, how in the world can you try to think that you can grasp God? You can't even grasp the wonders of nature and how it all works. You think you can grasp God, who made it? God in his grace and mercy has chosen to reveal what we can understand in his word, through his Spirit, and through Jesus. And we need to trust he will speak to us when we are ready to hear. You see, Job has gotten to the point after this, after Elihu speaks, he has been schooled. God has spoken through Elihu directly to Job. And finally, Job is willing to listen to the voice of God. And you're going to see, not today, but we're going to see that finally God is going to speak directly to Job. But that's for another time. But we need to understand that God speaks in many ways. He's beyond our ability to judge. His ways are beyond our understanding. And in all of this, we must learn to accept the mystery that is God. We must learn to accept the mystery that is God. You know, I'm one of these people that I am interested in virtually everything, even though I may not be able to comprehend it, like trigonometry, calculus, and things like that. But I'm interested in it. I think it's fascinating. And I'm one of these people that I have books on lots of different things because I want to know everything. I want to know as much as I can. But you know what I've learned? I'll never know it all. I'll never know it all. And sometimes that bothers me. Sometimes it's like, ah! But I will never, ever know it all. And I need to learn to be okay with that. God's story is still unfolding in our lives. And in the lives of the world. We need to sit back and enjoy it rather than fighting against the fact that we don't have all the answers. You know, you and I, sometimes we enjoy mysteries, we enjoy puzzles. But what happens when you finish a mystery or a puzzle? You put it aside and go to something else, right? It's not happening with God. He's a mystery you will never solve. You will find truths. God will reveal truths of who He is and our relationship to Him, enough for us through Jesus, through the Word. And as we get closer to Him, He will satisfy us. But we can never put Him in a box. We can never completely solve His mystery. If we were to understand everything about God, we would be basically God. We'll never get there, people. But you know what? The thing about God, there's always more to explore. There's always more to learn. And that is the joy that we can take in knowing about God. We can take joy in the journey. We can take joy in our growth. And yeah, we'll have questions, but that's okay. We just need to trust our Creator. Let's pray. Father God, thank you for your word. Thank you for who you are. For what you've revealed to us, Lord. And what you continue to reveal as we draw closer to you. Lord, if we seek you, we will find you. And we will know you more. But help us never to presume, Lord, that we're going to somehow solve that great mystery that is you. You are so far beyond us. But just help us to trust, Lord. Like a child trusts his father. He doesn't necessarily know all that his daddy's doing. Help us to trust you, Lord.